Hey, what's up, everybody? Thanks for joining me for another cognitive conversation. I'm your host, Jay Anarchon, and tonight joining me, I have the Wizards, Logan and Bryan from the Wizard Factory, thewizardfactory.com. How's it going, guys?
How's it going?
Pretty good. How about yourself?
Awesome. I'm going to give you a little bit more of an intro here, so just bear with me. This is coming from their website. Logan Hart is a passionate content creator, public speaker, musician, singer songwriter, producer, podcaster, voice actor, coach, and entrepreneur. He is a highly motivated and inspired by working with people, educating and assisting others with fundamental and empowering knowledge about cosmic and mental laws of reality, and collaborating with other visionaries to bring powerful creations of truth, beauty, and freedom into the world. And this is true. I've caught quite a few of their episodes, their podcasts on YouTube, and they're all fantastic. Definitely focused on promoting truth, freedom, and healing. And I've also checked out a little bit of your music as well, Logan, and it's pretty cool, man. I was digging quite a bit of that. So,
Oh, awesome.
yeah, nice. And then we have Bryan here. Bryan is a Vedic astrologer and content creator, rune shaman, and practitioner of European paganism. He is a student and teacher in the arts and sciences of self transformation, utilizing tools such as astrology, runes, personalized ritual, and more. He is passionate about helping others come to know themselves in order to live a fulfilled and empowered life. Awesome. Thanks a lot, Bryan. How's it going?
Pretty good. I'm doing well. Thank you for having us on.
Sweet. Yeah, my pleasure. It's my first time having two guests, so bear with me while I develop my multiple guest management skills.
Mhm.
So tonight's topic I wanted to focus on is titled "The Center Path," and the reason I chose to bring the Wizards on tonight was I caught one of their podcasts. It was titled "Beyond Black and White," so I'll leave a link to that podcast in the description of this one for you guys to check out. But it was really synchronistic. It was a topic that I was preparing to discuss potentially on my own, and I actually caught their podcast, and I thought it would be much more productive to have these two fine men on to discuss the topic with me. So I guess I'll give a little bit of a lead up here. When discussing things like right, wrong, left hand, right hand paths, concepts such as these, many people fail to recognize that what we're actually doing is we're playing on a polarity here, and we're not actually. Moving towards a state of balance is what we really should be focusing on. I think a lot of these concepts have been obfuscated, especially by the New Age movement. There's a lot of people out there saying, well, there is no right and wrong, there is no good, there is no evil. And from my own perspective, I do want to clarify that I'm not really taking that New Age perspective. There are definitely poles to everything. We could take hot and cold, for example. You can't say, well, there is no hot, there is no cold, and neither hot nor cold could do damage to something. There are these polar opposites. In the way that we perceive our reality, and they can have effects and consequences within our reality. So I do want to be clear that when I speak of a center path or balance, I'm not trying to take the new age stance that there is no right and wrong, there is no harm, there is no good, things such as that. I'd like to get both of your opinions on my perspective on the center path so far.
Well, for
Sure.
me, yeah, basically, I view morality versus immorality as a separate dynamic than polarity. Yeah, I wouldn't really view that as a polarity. Um, so what you have is morality is aligning your behavior, first your consciousness, because everything starts there, and then projects outward to the objective good of the universe. It's not subjective. I mean, certain values are subjective, but there is a very objective uh, structure of laws that govern things like abundance and harmony. Things that the balance of nature, you can see that where things, two notes harmonize in music or they clash together. That would be different than balancing, say, masculine and feminine energy, whereas there's sort of this androgenization going on in our societies, particularly the West, where I feel, if you think of the word neutered, is to be neutralized,
Yeah.
because the power itself is actually in the masculine and the feminine and sort of leaning into those. So in that way, you're not so much going for central like inertness as much as you're trying to integrate both simultaneously, where instead of unity, I like to think of it as triality. So you're going from duality to triality because you're actually still incorporating the energies intact, but then kind of triangulating that into a focused power source.
Yeah, very important clarification. I really like where you went with that. Thanks. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, and my thoughts on that are, especially, like Logan said, I think it's important to distinguish between the two. But when looking at polarity, what we are really getting at in that episode Beyond Black and White is make understanding that not every single thing in this reality field is just this simple black and white understanding. It was really all about being able to get people to look and see the nuance beyond things and understand the subtlety behind some things. Because yes, there are some things that are very clear. So it's not to say that black and white don't exist, but there's also gradients of gray in between because there are a mixture of these different things. So taking the time to look at that and really by with polarity, this is getting back to the hermetic principle, where of the law of polarity, and it's the pendulum swing back and forth. So it's recognizing that in nature there are these cycles, and especially when people are coming from a place of unconscious trauma, they will just react and they'll go from one extreme to the other. So they'll have these knee-jerk reactions and just immediately take a stance on something without taking the time to actually kind of see the whole situation, to really see the complicated simplicity in the situation, as I like to explain it. So I think it's really important to be able to and that step into that mindset that's more varied. And that's really where the animist and the pagan mindset kind of differs very much from the monotheist or the Abrahamic traditions, where they don't see everything just as this black and white thing. There's not just the God and the devil. There's it's a lot different perspective to be kind of operating from. So when we understand that everything, taking back to the trivium process, everything's built off of foundation, certain beliefs, assumptions, knowledge that we have, and then put through that filter, getting down to the root causes and belief systems and assumptions that we hold, that are the building the filter that we look through. We really have to take it back and look at those. And when we have assumptions and things in there that we don't even realize, those are a filter that we can be putting information through that is causing us to have that extreme stance in polarity. We can see it really big, obviously, in the political system with the left versus the right. That's probably one of the most, blatant examples out there we can look at. But that's where this reaction is coming from.
Of course, and thank you for bringing it around to that. That was going to be my next point. Is Logan had mentioned that these things aren't necessarily polar in themselves, all of them as well, but they are used to play on psychological polarity within us and create, sorry, what's the word I'm looking for? A polar dialectic, right? So that's the goal here psychologically for the players in the game here, and I love how you brought up the law of polarity and then the law of rhythm with the pendulum swing there as well. Yeah, definitely coming into play. And what we also have to remember here is that Even aside from the gray areas, there are certain circumstances where something can be negative in um, one example and positive in the other, right? We could take, physical examples are the easiest way to understand our reality, in my opinion. So we could take the example of extreme hot and extreme cold again. You could use extreme cold to flash freeze some food and preserve the nutritional content in it and store it for a longer period of time. Or yeah, the extreme cold up here in Canada, people die in the winter. People that live on the streets literally freeze to death up here. So in that instance, the cold is very bad. And extreme heat, you can use it to cook food. You could also, burn somebody alive with it. And this dynamic also plays into things that we would label under terms like morality and stuff as well. Unfortunately, when you bring in you know, the principle of self-defense and the sacred right to self-defense, a lot of people only acknowledge that on a physical level, but there's psychological self-defense as well, and there's spiritual self-defense. So being a father, raising your children and trying to explain to them that it's not good to lie and manipulate to people to cheat them and take advantage of them. But if say somebody is trying to impose a false authority on you and take advantage of you in some way, it is okay to lie to protect yourself, because they're attempting to psychologically manipulate you. So using psychological manipulation to protect yourself is not a wrongful act at that point. So yeah, our reality is much more dynamic than like you said in your episode, just black and white. And it's it really speaks as well to the legal system that we have in place, put here by man, when you take these sort of dynamics into consideration, right? So go ahead, guys. Logan, can you speak on that?
Absolutely. I want to really thank you for shedding light on, incorporating things like lying as a potential for self-defense. And I mean, this is just something that we've really been kind of diving more into ourselves as far as trying to go further, fleshing out these ideas of morality, because the sort of there's a shortage of teachers, and the ones that are out there, they're doing a great job, but I see how it's failing certain people who aren't capable of their own independent thought, and they're looking outside themselves for some sort of just almost like the Bible. They're using the Kabbalion as like just another Bible, like something to, just kind of model. And these sort of aspects really get lost in translation. There are psychological and emotional harm that are just as real, objectively true as a physical harm. They're harder to see, they're harder to measure, but they're absolutely there, and they apply to the laws of morality just as much, in my opinion. So
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
really important that we're starting to expand these ideas and flesh them out further. And I also wanted to add something as in context to this idea. You mentioned sort of the left hand path and the right hand and the center, and we're looking at the so essentially the Kabbalistic tree of life. and
Exactly.
and I don't have a lot of experience on this myself, but I actually recently watched some material on that I found really interesting and thought provoking. And one thing I found interesting was how there's, first of all, there's the macro and the microcosmic tree of life that sort of correlate to that law of correspondence, as within so without. But there are some differences where the microcosmic that is reflecting the inner landscape uh, is more in line with that polarity aspect that we were talking about of hot and cold are actually just two different polarities of the same dynamic itself, whereas the macro, the external manifestation, is a lot more the moral, black and white sort of depiction of that, if you will. So where to me, just the I could put it like that intro, the internal aspect is more about balancing those energies within, which of course corresponds and projects outward via law of mentalism and manifests in reality as the actual polarities in reality. So we're not trying to go through life balancing good with evil in our actions. We're trying to be as in alignment with the objective good as possible, whereas the internal is more that sort of, I guess you could look at it like the external would be more the apophatic. There's what, you learn what to do by learning what not to do. So
Yeah.
if you take that left hand path, it's sort of that Loki energy of tricking you into doing the wrong thing so that you feel the consequences of that, and understand you need to adjust your behavior accordingly. But then that internal would be more like, basically like that balancing, like trying to find that happy 98.6 degree, what's the word, homeostasis,
Yeah.
basically, internally.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess what that brings up for me, that's an interesting perspective to look at it through. What we can also look at this though is maybe bringing in some of the Eastern philosophy, say in like Taoism or from the Vedic tradition here, whereas the left hand and right hand path are more referred to in the context of the specific energies of masculine and feminine. So the
Mm-hmm.
masculine be associated with the positive energy, and the feminine being associated with the negative or the internal. So kind of reflecting a little bit of what you're saying is where it's like that negative, that feminine process, the left hand path is dealing with the internal uh, structure and path, and the right hand path is be dealing with the external. And this really hits on something that I think a lot of people look over when they're thinking about things like magic, for example. So, first off, to define magic, magic is the art and science of being able to create change in accordance with your will. So, being able, it's intelligence in action. So, we're being able to recognize patterns and then creatively interact with them, and change those patterns to give us outcomes that are in alignment with our will.
Mm-hmm.
So
Using the laws of nature,
That's
basically
right.
right,
leverage the correct
absolutely.
laws. Mm-hmm.
And this is where we can see a lot of people will talk about white magic or black magic, but when you start to understand knowledge in the universe is neutral.
That's right.
So a simple example, like you're talking about taking it back to physical reality examples, we could look at something like a gun, obviously. So a gun could be used to murder somebody, so for a harmful act, a cosmic law violation, or it could be used to defend your life or save someone else.
Mm-hmm.
you know so that tool itself is neutral. It's your intention, your will behind it, that is determining the outcome of it and whether or not it's in alignment with cosmic law. So I think it's very useful to the idea of the center path to me is being able to understand both the feminine, the negative, the internal aspect of things, as well as the positive. We can see this in astrology as well, when different planets are ruled by different signs, and different signs will represent either the external or the internal expression of that planet. So these are cosmic universal truths and laws that we can see, and they come up in many different ways, reflected through many different traditions and different sciences,
Yeah,
that we can
definitely.
discover and learn from.
Right.
Yeah,
It all comes back to power, basically,
for
because
sure.
knowledge is power, and essentially any tool, if knowledge is a tool, the power is the bottom line.
Def
Power is just raw potential that, because we have consciousness, we're able to direct power to influence that change, like you were talking about, Brian, and that's pretty
Hmm.
much what magic is in a nutshell.
Yeah, and that's
Absolutely.
where intent comes into play, of course. And I think just mainly for the listening audience and for ourselves, I guess as well, it is important to distinguish and clarify these concepts as much as we can, right? And Logan, you had spoken about the polarity and had mentioned it's not really a polarity. you're right. It's a duality. So maybe we should refer to it as a duality in maybe all circumstances, because that would probably help us understand our reality more clearly. And that goes right along with what Brian was saying with the masculine and feminine being positive or negative. I like to refer to them as generative or receptive.
Mhm.
Because I think that's a little bit clearer of a picture. And and exactly, magic is definitely as simple as that. Understanding how your reality works, and then becoming a player in the game instead of simply being a pawn. And Logan, you had brought up the Kybalion. That's actually one of my favorite books. I'm planning a presentation on it shortly, and I'm going to cover it from both ends because that's another book that's playing on that master slave dynamic. Although there is, 90% gold in there, there is some some other stuff you have to watch for, right? And again, this is all from somebody else's perspective. I can't recall the author's name just off the top of my head here, but he was a lawyer, right? So this is somebody that was deeply involved with man's law, and he was trying to describe these principles of the universe in a clear, concise way, just as man's law is, right? So again, you're getting to something that most people don't understand, and are trying to communicate to other people who don't understand, right?
Right. For
Mhm.
me, in my opinion, I think this again, it traces back to that monotheistic programming that there's so many people out there that even consciously or the tip of the iceberg of their mind, they have rejected or Christianity or whatever religion that they were brought up in, but in name only, really. But the programming is still very much there because it is based on trauma. And if you're not transmuting, if you're not digging beneath that threshold into the depths of your subconscious mind, you're not going to get at those roots that are still there. And essentially, man's law is exploiting this just in the same way as because the Bible kind of did it first. And I'm not really picking on Christianity, solely. I'm not singling it out necessarily, but it is sort of the prevalent religion here in the West. And again, it is a very pervasive uh, mind mind altering belief system that is still driving a lot of subconscious behavior, even within people who think that they've risen above it or become woke to it or whatnot. But essentially, what the law is doing is in this dynamic that I'm getting at is they're still looking to something outside themselves to tell them what right and wrong is. They're appealing to authority, whether it's the Bible or a court system or what has been legislated. They want every single situation spelled out for them so that they don't have to actually exercise their own conscience and discernment.
That's
And
right.
I think that's really the heart of it right there.
Well, I think most people are actually afraid of freedom. But let's hear your points on that, Brian.
Yeah, I mean that's something that Logan and I we speak about a lot is how many of our things that we consider normal in society can actually be traced back to monotheism and the Abrahamic traditions and some of those mindsets, those dominator mindsets that came in. And that's one of the reasons why our focus at the Wizard Factory, or one of our focuses, is really tapping into the animist and the pagan mindset, the indigenous mindset. Because if we look around the world, we can see, if you go back far enough, every indigenous people, they're animist. They believe that they have the understanding that everything is consciousness. So then from that, they're polytheistic, or pagan. So they have many different representations of different gods. So when you have that mindset, you start to see the world as this intricate web that works together. Whereas, with monotheism and things, as Logan was saying, instead of everything being a part of yourself, everything becomes something outside of yourself. So you become
Mm-hmm.
separate from nature,
Yeah.
which leads you wanting to dominate things, and then we have nation building, and wars get larger and larger, and then you're trying to convert people like forcibly to your mindset, and then you're setting up, if we can look through history and how that mindset actually helped establish the modern system, the statism that we see today. um, so we can, like I said, there's a lot we can see here, for sure, and that's a big subject that we're going to delve into, and we've mentioned it a bit on our show, but we have a large project in the works that's going to take us quite a while to actually do, that we're going to dive very deep into these things. But for now, I think it's interesting for people to maybe bring up and think about and consider themselves that, hey, maybe I do have some of these attachments, or how is this actually connected to this, or this one assumption that was in society that was brought on by this belief system led to these other assumptions happening, and then it's like building this
Mm.
foundation, this rotten foundation of false information,
Yeah.
that when people are putting all their actions through the filter of that, and then they're taking action on that false information, we're creating the chaos that we see here now.
Definitely. Well, and again, which brings us back to the topic. It's really all playing off of that polar dialectic psychologically, right? And the first thing that they have to do is trick you into believing that there can only be one right way and one wrong way, one good, one bad, all the time, right?
Hmm.
So then you have to pick a side.
Right.
And that's definitely where that's right. So that's where we're going to fall short, and it carries on to it totally saturates every aspect of our society, right? If you
Hmm.
look at the battle between the sexes, children and parents, race wars, even sports teams, every aspect of our society is meant to encourage and nourish this dynamic within our psyche. And that brings us to exactly what you were saying, Logan, is recognition of the problem, or where you've fallen short, or your programming, is step one. Or let's make a tarot reference. It's the card zero. It's the Fool card. So you've only now just recognized anything really, and now the work begins. And
Mhm.
everybody wants some quick fix. They want to do like NLP or something, and or get hypnotized, and or watch a 1 hour or 2 hour segment on YouTube, and
Listen to some Bible beats and just call it a day.
that's right, exactly right. But realistically, that's where the real work begins, and there's no arrival point, and it's a constant battle, like there's definitely, if you're dealing with coming to terms with the fact that you are viewing your reality from at least an obfuscated perspective. It might not all be lies, but you're not seeing everything totally clearly. Just recognizing that fact alone as an adult, it's it can push you into a state of self-loathing, and you have to put in the work to pull yourself out of that and recognize the problems, and constantly catch yourself. I'll catch myself in the middle of conversations, or while I'm thinking about acts, and recognize that the pattern I'm about to play out might not even be my own thought pattern, or my own course of action that I would choose to take. A lot of these are programs, and you can get into the work of people like Dr. Bruce Lipton and stuff. And he breaks this stuff down on a scientific level. It's been proven, right? Physically, on a genetic level, the things we're talking about. So how you view your reality is key, and that's why they definitely, the focus of the attack, I would say, is the mind through many
Mm.
other means, right? I think health is a major pillar of that, because if your body isn't getting the nutrients that you require, your brain cannot function properly. It's a fact, right? It's a
Hmm.
complex computer system that needs certain fuels to function. So to be running at optimal performance, we need to take our physical health into account. And
Mm,
upon recognizing these dynamics that are being played against us, and everywhere in society, like you said, Logan, we have to do the hard work,
mm,
and be willing to do what it takes to dig our way out of that. And Bryan, I just wanted to make a point, as well. A fact that one of my friends brought to my attention is that the word pagan, you know, hundreds of years ago, actually just meant, like a country folk. So somebody who
Right.
didn't
Like
live in the
someone who
city.
lived in the woods, they're nature worshippers. So
Well,
it's kind of
f-
generally as a in from the Christian viewpoint, it would be used as like a derogatory term,
that's right.
but for people to identify like in the neo movement, there's a few different terms people use, like pagan, polytheistic, heathen. There's a lot of these different terms people will identify and use with. I find animist to be the most accurate, but that's also one that people aren't that familiar with. So,
For sure. And, for people who think that this animist tradition, holds no value, I think they're just totally disconnected from nature. And, the more that I reconnect with nature, the more this connection just reestablishes itself within me. And a funny anecdote relating to this, is very recently I was like, my dad had a tiger's eye ring when I was younger, and I've been having like dreams with cats, and like cats have been entering my visions and stuff, and, in meditation, and I'd mentioned this, and, then I do a little bit more research and find out that the tiger's eye is actually my power stone as well, right? So this is how, like, the synchronicities in your life and how your research can awaken things within you at a genetic level, that you may not have been aware of. But it does take a reconnection to nature at some level, and we're definitely all missing that. And, you both had mentioned it, yeah, like that polar dynamic doesn't play out in nature. And the master slave dynamic, it
mhm.
doesn't play out in nature. And realistically, I guess, that's what this is all based on, essentially, as a master slave dynamic as well, because for one to be superior to the other, obviously there has to be a dominating force and a submissive force in a way. Again, not getting back to that, concept of generative and passive or acceptive,
mm.
more based on, dominance and control, right?
Mhm.
Right. Well, for me, what that brings up, you mentioned, nature being in a much more state of balance and kind of harmony, even though there's much chaos involved in nature, and the more time you spend in nature, you see both sides of that. But really, the way that I like to sort of the perspective that I like to take on observing nature is that nature itself, like the fact that these life forms exist, is such an incredible expression of complexity in the universe, like the fractalization of everything. um, and then you have, that's the force of evolution, and then you have the force of involution, which is always kind of tugging at life to challenge it, which is actually the engine of evolution. That challenge, that constant trying to break down and drag down and kill things, is actually what is making that which perseveres stronger every single day. And that's what evolution is it's expansion. And taking this back to these ideas of polarity and black and white thinking, um, for me, there are both at play at all times. And to me, this kind of, some may disagree. For me, I like to kind of think of that as masculine and feminine, where feminine deals in gradients and scales, and it's that flow, right? Everything sort of just melds together. You know where green is roundabout and where blue is, but there's really no like hard line between them. That's all just sort of one thing. And then the masculine is binary, like computer programming. It's that left brain zeros and ones. It either is or it isn't, and both of these dynamics are always in play. So I think where people run into trouble is they just get these things confused, where something deals in a gradient and they think about it in binary terms, like awakening. Like, well, I woke up back in 2012. Did you? And then what have you been doing since? Like it kind of just leaves the whole process out of it. So, healing isn't linear, awakening isn't linear. These are all just an ongoing process, like you said yourself, Jay, that it never really, where you begin, like where you end is where you begin. Like it's all just this ongoing process. And I see a lot of moral relativists say things, that are kind of akin to, if you can't know everything, then why bother trying to know anything? It's
Yeah.
it's like basically saying, well, perfect health doesn't exist, so therefore I'm just going to drink and eat as much poison as possible. It's faulty logic.
Yeah.
And even within the constructs of morality, there are certain gray areas, especially in when you're adding in real life situations, like, like in your head, and hypothetically, theoretically, what is a right and what is a wrong. But sometimes situations aren't that nice and neat and clean. You kind of got to get dirty to navigate your way through things. But even that, it's still not a free pass to just, oh, well, whatever serves me is cool. You're still aiming for the best good possible. It's just that perfection isn't always attainable. In fact, and I think even that traces back to that monotheistic programming yet again that we've been talking about, of, like you said, Bryan, seeing the nature and God as something separate from yourself. And right in line with that is God is this perfect being, and we're just these just miserable worms that are full of sin and can't help and can't save ourselves, and we need, but
But
then
we're made in his image.
right, and we're only that because we're comparing ourselves to perfection, which is literally unattainable, and we're basically gaslighting ourselves by accepting that original sin. Whereas the animist or the pagan perspective is seeing that you're more than just a sinful being, but at the same time, the gods aren't perfect either. So you're bringing yourself up and you're bringing them down, where you learn from the gods and the gods learn from you too. And it's this ever going gabo of exchange of value and learning and everything like that. And we're all growing together, because that's what it means when you think about the cells in your body are individuals, but they're cooperating on a higher system. They need that collective in order to really be fully actualized as what they're meant to be.
Mhm.
Definitely. Bryan?
Yeah. So you had said something, Jay, when you're a while back when you're talking about how you really think that it is the mind that they choose to target in order to distract people. And I think there's a couple ways we can look at this. Obviously, taking it back to that the principle mentalism, there's a reason that's the first hermetic principle.
That's right.
Is everything is conscious, everything begins in the mind. So you're absolutely on point when you say you target the mind. And for me, that's why it's so absolutely important. If you want to start to really know thyself, you have to start looking at the arts of self gnosis. You have to start, looking into tarot or astrology or the runes or whatever system you're wanting to use. Start somewhere.
Mm.
You start having another medium, another science that you can use to reflect back your subconscious and unconscious mind to yourself. Because, especially for me with astrology, when I started learning that, I learned so much about myself. So instead of just kind of navigating blind, it was like I had a roadmap to my own, psychology. So I could start understanding how not only I operated with myself on the microcosm, but with the macrocosm, the world around me, with the physical reality field. When you can start having that foundational knowledge to build off of and then grow from there, you're giving yourself a roadmap of how to start to navigate consciousness, how to start to navigate life. And you can keep yourself from being swung into dialectics as easy because you understand how you're operating as a person. Like, oh, I have this certain disposition towards this trait, or in this area of my life, I prefer to have things this way. You're bringing a gnosis of being able to understand why you do the things you do. And then, awareness brings choice. And, I think that's why the universe, there's two fundamental things that are pillars of the universe and how it operates. And that first is awareness and choice. They're both in there. Awareness brings choice. It's free will and consciousness. So the more awareness you have, the higher your consciousness becomes in its understanding, the more free will you have, the more responsibility you will gain. And you have to start to know thyself, and then you can take that and expand it outwards, through the law of correspondence.
Mm.
That's right. I definitely agree with everything you guys are saying there. And getting back to cooperation and waking up, quote unquote, like, let's look at the terminology we're using here. When you wake up in the morning, is your day over?
Mhm.
Waking up is the beginning, right? So
Yeah.
if I use a term like that, that for me was the start of my journey. The recognition of the way the problems are functioning on in our society for the human race was really what I deem my waking up moment. I pretty much was one of those people that was very rebellious my whole life, and I always knew there was something wrong with the system. But when I figured out why there was something wrong with the system and what it was, on a base materialist level, I guess, that's what I consider my waking point, because that's what triggered me to do further research, and doing further research is what made me come to the conclusion that I was the problem. Like, if you guys want out there, you want to know why you're not free, and you want to know why there's so much, you know, um, just total
Chaos.
evil and chaos, yes, in our society, look in the mirror, right? If every single person was doing the internal work they needed to do, that's all we would need to do, right? We wouldn't have to have conversations like this and put video out. But we do have to do that now because people are alienated. Even for myself, I've been finding it very, very difficult to find people that I would consider peers. You know what I mean? Like, realistically, there's probably just in my personal life, aside from people that I've begun to network with, maybe 3 or 4 people that I would consider on a peer level with myself. And pretty much everybody else I know is stuck in the materialist perspective of the world, and they're really not after anything greater than just base level desires and survival, right? And it's very easy to keep people trapped in that survival mode when it's really so damn hard to survive in this reality, under the structure that we're allowing to be enforced upon us. And again, I think that's right on topic, because people, the funny thing is it's played off the polar dynamic, but people exist in this state of cognitive dissonance as well, where they will just lie to themselves. And Man's Law is a great example. How can the government or government officials do things that are illegal for us to do? If things that are illegal are, they're based in some sort of morality or consensual, consensus on morality or whatever, then shouldn't it be wrong across the board? So on top of the polar dynamic, we have the cognitive dissonance, where everybody's entertaining two conflicting ideas within their mind at the same time, right? So essentially, the longer you do that, the more psychological damage um, you you end up causing towards yourself, right? So
Mm.
you're essentially destroying yourself, and they've done studies on this, and the brain scans from people that exist in this state of cognitive dissonance for extended periods of times at extreme levels, they look like the brains of drug addicts and stuff, right? So lying to yourself every day is just as bad as abusing hard drugs, as
Right.
far as your psyche is concerned. So,
And not to mention, um, I would add that basically by having such cognitive dissonance, because our experience is always a direct result of our consciousness level, and therefore the actions that we're taking via the trivium process. So if you are holding conflicting ideas, not only is that causing damage internally, but you're creating chaos through your actions subconsciously, which is then further traumatizing you. So it perpetuates that cycle of like a downward spiral and further calcifies you into that mind, because the wounded ego loves confirmation bias. It's always looking for that story to confirm through external stimuli, like, see, like the world is hostile, or see, I'm just a fuck up, or whatever it is that it's looking for, to that it's found is its sense of identity. And that's why the mind control is so at the forefront of this spiritual warfare, because the mind is the Midgard, the Middle Earth, between the physical and the spiritual realms. And those, I mean, you can look at it from the brain chemistry as well, the hemispheres. They have people trapped in either a left or a right brain prison, and they're using these dialectics to keep them stuck there through the mind control, because the mind is the gateway to both worlds. So basically, that's where the cognitive dissonance comes in, because if you create trauma from one side, say the masculine, then that's going to push you more into a feminist, or that's where that's really actually coming from, is feminist is a reaction to toxic masculinity, which is wounded masculinity, and therefore that makes the femininity toxic in and of itself. So it's all just this reactionary force that's perpetuating itself, because they're poisoning one side of the equation with trauma, that causes that knee jerk reaction to, well, this is bad, so I'm going to go the exact opposite way. For me, for example, once I first started becoming disillusioned to Christianity, my first stop was atheism. I'm like, well, I'm going to go as far away from that as possible. Now I'm just going to deny anything metaphysical or spiritual, because that triggers that trauma of what had been imposed on me for the first 18, 19 years of my life. So that's really where we have to step in and understand the way that we're being manipulated through these dialectics. And basically, it all comes down to not throwing out the baby with the bathwater. That's where the cognitive dissonance comes in, is that knee-jerk reaction of, well, that's bad, and so you're throwing out the value that comes with that polarity, that is, both are necessary, like a battery. You have to have the positive and negative to get that charge.
that's
Mhm.
right. Just before I let you interject, Brian, Bruce Lipton, he refers to these as programs, right? And each of these programs has a switch, basically. So when you feel that knee jerk reaction, as you've referred to it, you're getting triggered, right? Somebody pushed the button. We even use that pushing your buttons.
Trigger.
Yeah, they
Yes.
pushed the button to play that program, and that program might not be yours, right? So go ahead,
Mhm.
Brian.
Yeah, so I want to take it back to, where you're talking about defining terms and we talk about the awakening process. I think it's extremely important to distinguish this in the sense that it's not just a single event. It
Yes.
is a process that's constantly happening. It's a death and rebirth that is constantly happening. It's always a transformation. So there's not just going to be this one event where all of a sudden, you went from being a totally unaware person to being a totally informed person. It's going to take years and years of study and hard work and dedication to continually grow more and more and continually gain new levels of awareness, and it doesn't stop. So I think that's the first thing that would be interesting to distinguish. And then the next thing I wanted to look at is, when we're talking about people's cognitive dissonance and things, uh, another way we can look at this here is from the in the Norse tradition and in many other traditions like the Taoist, the Vedic, they don't see the human being as just being made up of only one soul. So as we teach it, you're actually made up of a different number of beings. So you have like a higher self, lower self, and a middle self. Or you could also be looking at this as the different levels of the mind if we want to look at it through a psychological perspective. So we have the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the unconscious mind. So people in their conscious mind could very much be thinking that they have one thought, but then there's still subconscious and unconscious programming in there that is conflicting. So people are then out of alignment with themselves. So that's when they're out of alignment with yourself, that's when you start manifesting chaos in your life, because that chaos is supposed to be an indicator for you, a signal, so you can recognize that you're out of alignment with yourself somewhere. So when we see, an example would be like a drug addict that is saying that, man, I really want to quit. Like I don't want to, bang any more dope, or I don't want to drink again, or, whatever it may be. But yet they keep doing it. They just can't seem to stop themselves. So yeah, their conscious mind is saying that, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. But the whole reason they're doing that is because they're playing out unconscious traumas, and then they're manifesting those. So that it's like this conflict going on in their life, or this cognitive dissonance. So I think looking at it from that perspective, bringing, more layers into it of understanding, and especially taking into the account the unconscious and the subconscious mind, because that's where the vast majority of our programming and how we operate and function as human beings actually comes from there. But everybody's always stuck in the intellect and up here, and they're not really wanting to dig deeper into things like that.
Oh yeah, and there's many traditions that break us up into even more segments than that. Like,
Right.
I think
Yeah.
the Egyptian was like 12 or 15, isn't the Rosicrucian tradition? I think they even have like seven aspects of ourself or something, right? So
Right. Yeah. There's a lot of ways to look at it, to where you'll see like three, like a general three, but then they'll also be kind of broke down even more from there. So that definitely an excellent point to bring up, is that we see this reflected in a lot of different
Mm.
traditions.
for sure, and another important point to bring up about this is all of this is really based in just simple knowledge of self, even getting back to the concept of magic, know thyself, right? So, um, the state we're in right now is we don't know ourselves, and the controlling class does know us very well. And they know themselves very well as well. So, I think that's a very important point to bring up. When people talk about government and things like that, I think they make a mistake that of thinking that things happen by accident. We're talking about large groups of the most highly educated people on the face of the earth, and many of them are initiated into the occult as well. And in my opinion, there isn't much that happens on a social political level that isn't damn near 100% manufactured. And with the level of media saturation we have within our lives, it's even that more easy to control, right? Like, I don't know about you guys. Like, I don't really do the whole smartphone thing. I still have a smartphone, but I don't use it for email or data or anything like that. But I know, like, my friends, they're getting texts for government alerts now and stuff. So there's this penetration of the government into our personal life through social media that's happening now. And it's so easy for them to play on these dynamics through social media as well, because, all you have to do on Facebook to have an opinion is repost a meme to your wall, right? So I think it takes away a lot of the almost the desire to think and analyze these issues for yourself. Um, And Brian, getting back to what you were saying as well, I think a lot of that self-destructive behavior, it really comes down to a state of self-loathing, right? So
Yep.
we've all been, I guess going back again to the monotheism as well, like both of you guys have been touching on. It's based in self-hatred, self-loathing, inferiority, externalizing not only your problems but also externalizing all of your solutions, right?
Hmm.
So when you're addicted to drugs, again, using the same example, I'm addicted to something that's more powerful than me, and I need something outside of myself to save myself from that.
Right.
Right.
And I actually did a conversation on addiction a few episodes back, and I'm living proof that you can beat drug addiction without 12-step programs and without
Hmm.
bowing down and admitting that you are powerless, because you're not. And, the last thing you want to do, as well, touching on that same subject, is the last thing you want to do. When you're in an unhealthy, sick state, is surround yourself with people that are unhealthy and sick in the same ways that you are, right? So that's why I love having conversations like this, because again, like we were saying earlier, there's no arrival point, and it's not like the three of us are sitting here trying to preach from a pedestal or anything. We're sitting here recognizing our own faults and just trying to share with everybody some of the processes we go through to try to counterbalance that and achieve homeostasis, right?
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, I love
Yeah, I
that you
mean,
mentioned.
go
Um,
ahead. Sorry, my bad, Logan.
but yeah. Yeah, like that whole group think thing. That's something that was just going through my head there is too. Is that because these mind control systems are so far widespread on the globe, it's easy for people to just try to become collectivized with other people that are addicted to their traumas so that they can get together. I mean, that's what church is. The whole
Yeah,
idea of fellowship and congregation is just so that you can get in a group with people that all share your trauma bonding basically, and all saying, yeah, God's great, isn't he? Oh, he sure is. Why would we ever question that? Because then it's that ego getting that confirmation back, just to kind of validating the story that you're addicted to. And it's so ironic how you were just talking about that 12-step programming, and how, I mean, is that really a solution that basically you're just uh, replacing one addiction that you're powerless against to a different one? You're basically
exactly.
saying, God's my heroine now, and I'll just give my power up to God because
Yeah.
Well, I think you really hit the nail on the head where you say it goes back to self-loathing, and how this ties back to monotheism is I like to look at the concept of original sin. So very foundational concept in
Yeah.
Christianity, and I like to look at original sin as the acronym is original self-imposed negativity.
Wow, that's
It was
beautiful. Yeah.
it was an idea that we accept that we have to impose upon ourselves that, oh, we aren't, we are these beings that are just faulty right off the bat as soon as we're born, and that only with accepting some power that's greater than us and that's outside of us can we be saved. The just even the idea that you need saved from something,
Yeah.
is a very self-loathing idea at its core. And then, when society is accepting this kind of idea, we even see this kind of play out on the other side of things with, a lot of atheists, or, even people that aren't Christians on the conscious level. They a lot of times will kind of take this materialist mindset, or you'll hear them say things like, human beings are a virus, or they have this kind of very poisoned worldview in context of just thinking that people are just these dumb animals that need control, they need government, all these kind of self-loathing, limiting beliefs. We can kind of really trace them all back to that original self-imposed negativity, and that's why it's a something that we hit on a lot. And like I said, we have a very in-depth project, that we're going to be developing over the next couple of years to really address this and from the fullest, and cover every perspective we possibly can on it.
Yeah, for sure. That's The one thing that I really love about your guys' work is you're really focusing on healing, and really that's where we need to be pointing our attention today. You know, there's a lot of people doing a lot of good work out there, a lot of much needed independent journalism. But there's a lot of huge platforms out there that are still promoting fear, right? And again, we're getting into a polar schism here, and living in a state of fear, and just focusing on the problems all the time instead of the solution. And you know, I try to be careful with what I say here. Like, I think it's important to stay somewhat informed on current events because it can affect your personal well being in the present. So, that is something that we have to sort of maintain some semblance of awareness. But we have to be really careful not to get caught there and stuck there, and again, externalizing really what the problem is, because like Logan touched on, it's all a manifestation of our internal state, right? So if we're in chaos internally, of course we're all going to manifest chaos externally. And I think for some people that haven't looked into the topics, it can seem a little bit unrealistic. But there's very simple ways to look at these things. On a one-on-one level is the easiest way. Like, somebody who has very little self-respect and doesn't care about themselves at all isn't capable of caring about you or somebody else, right? So I'm sure we've all had somebody in our life that didn't take very good care of themselves, and maybe when you were around them, things didn't turn out so good for you on whatever front. Even if it's something as simple as like, oh, I'm trying to eat healthier, and every time I see this one friend, they want to go out and get shitty food. It's all about that you can't give what you don't have principle. And you will give what you have, whether you like it or not. So if you're manifesting that chaos and self-loathing and polar schism within yourself, then yes, it will be manifest out into the world. So yeah, it really just comes down to healing and balancing.
Hmm.
Absolutely, and
Yeah.
definitely
Well,
starts with you. You know,
yeah, and that
that,
where you're, talking about, balance. Like it's great to stay informed on those current events. And this, we can kind of tie this back in, and we did a couple episodes, like a two-part episode where the first part it was called, they're called trapped in tunnel vision, and the first one is all love and light. We kind of addressed the new age mindset and the misconceptions behind those, and how that's one polarized dialectic. But then the next one we looked at was being trapped in tunnel vision. It's all doom and gloom, and being stuck in that fear-based mindset of, or the conspiracy mindset is kind of one to look at. There's a lot of ways it could play out, and people can go to our channel and check out those episodes to see more what I'm talking about. But again, that's tying back to being the dialectic. So it's important to recognize and have the balance of both. That, yeah, in our reality field there are things that are really beautiful, really amazing. There's a lot of love, there is a lot of beauty here, but there is also some things that are very difficult. There's suffering. There's darkness that we also have to look at and deal with. And you don't, you don't want to cut yourself off from either of those, because they're experiences that are teaching you. So delve into all those parts of yourself, including doing that shadow work. You're recognizing that there's a part of you that is like that. Because if take to the animist perspective, everything is consciousness.
right, you're
Well,
the all experiencing itself and exploring itself.
right, and that includes, it's not just this one experience of, oh, everything is love. That's a very kind of, or when you get to the highest truth that you're just only going to be aligned with love. That's cutting yourself off. That's limiting yourself to one aspect of experience. There are a whole range of different emotions, a whole range of different experiences that we're here to have, and it's important to have all of them and then be able to integrate them and find balance with them.
Hmm.
Yeah, Logan.
Yeah, I was just gonna comment on what you were talking about before, about how there's a lot of there are more and more sources of information out there, the alternative media, and that's a wonderful thing, especially the more that people are really starting to utilize this amazing tool that is the internet, realizing, yeah, it's enslaving us in some ways, but it's also liberating in others. Back to what we talked about before, where tools are just neutral and it's how they're being used. But I definitely think even within that sphere, there's a shortage of people that are telling you that you are the most, like, going within is the most important thing. And that's where actually the real work begins, because everything out there, and it's great to be informed and knowledgeable about these things, but all of that is just a mirror for what's in here. And so, the zero card isn't the government, it's not the dark occultist, it's the fool. And who's the fool? The fool or the fool that follows him, to quote Star Wars. That just popped into my head, because really, like, take a look at yourself. It's really, and that is your kingdom, that is your domain. That's what you have true internal monarchy over, and that you can actually have full dominion to transmute and to create exactly what you want. It's like your own real, property. Like, you have this raw material, your inner spiritual landscape, and you can design it exactly the way you want. You want to put a hedge of bushes over here, or plant a tree, or whatever. Like, that's yours, by your divine right.
Definitely, and they are trying to find a way to take even that from us. And again, let's be careful. You don't want to get caught on an extreme in the in what you were just discussing here either, because it's not only about the inside, right? Our outside sensory perceptions are here so that we can experience what we are manifesting. And this goes right along with what Bryan just touched upon as well, because what is polarity, and why does polarity exist in our reality, right? And I honestly believe, based on my research and personal experience and self reflection, that it's necessary, and neither would exist without the other. Let's take something simple like sweet and sour. How would you be able to distinguish between sweet and sour if sweet and sour didn't exist? If sour didn't exist, there would be no sweet. There would only be whatever that is, right? So we need this contrast. We need something to distinguish from, and also the negative experiences in our reality are what we learn from. We don't learn from having a really great day. You don't come home from a great day and say, "Oh, I learned so many lessons today." You come home from a really bad day, reflect on your day, and that's when you realize how many lessons you learned throughout that day. And that's from my personal experience. And
Well,
go ahead.
I would say that you had a great day because of what you've already learned.
That's right.
That's
There
why
you
you
go.
didn't experience the chaos. So then, now that's an indicator that it's actually time for you to step outside your comfort zone and continue to expand, because again, this is an always ever going process. And there's a reason that, I mean, it's verified scientifically that your brain, like you just said, it does retain based on those negative emotions associated with the negative experience. That's why you remember exactly what it was like on 9/11, because it was hard, it was challenging, and then that it becomes such a visceral imprint on your psyche.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm. Well, and I think you hit on something great there. Looking at and finding the balance of, yeah, it's good to look within, but also looking out in our reality field, because that's the learning experience. That's really
Mm,
what the science of astrology is all about. Is you're looking at when you take your birth chart, it's like an energetic snapshot of where all the planets in the sky, where all the bodies in the sky. And then by looking at the macrocosm and the qualities that they have and how all those variables combine, you are then studying the reflection of that, which is you being the microcosm. So that's why you're studying your internal psychology based off of the reflection of where everything was. So getting back to that concept of you're integrating the knowledge of both, and diving into one will help you understand the other even more. So as within, as without, but then we can apply that same concept to masculine and feminine, like we were talking about earlier. Diving into one will actually really help you, start to learn about the other. When you can start to integrate them together, that's when you really start to find the true power and that balance, that center path that we've been talking about here.
That's
Yeah,
right.
what that's bringing up for me is kind of what you were talking about earlier about how there's, free will and consciousness. There's deterministic factors and there are influences, and it's very
Hmm.
important to understand the difference between, because like you said, the astrology is not set in stone, but they have a strong impact on your experience. So it's kind of like, if you have yard work to do and it's super hot outside, that's going to create a challenging experience, but that does, you can make that choice. I'm going to get this work done regardless of how hot it is. It's going to be more difficult, but your decision, your discernment, and that free will is, still intact through that. And then that
Absolutely.
challenge is what actually strengthens your resolve, your willpower, because that involutionary force of the universe, like we talked about earlier, is trying to drag you down and pull you apart, but it's causing that hyper razor focus of just like, no, like this, and just driving you forward.
Yeah, for
Hmm.
sure. And it's again very synchronistic that you're bringing up psychology and birth charts. I just recently started delving into that and have a birth chart that I've been looking at here, just a preliminary one. So yeah, it's pretty staggering how accurate this can be. And again, it's I'm not the type of person to just believe anything, or and I'm not looking for a solution. Let's put it that way. I wasn't like looking for something in astrology. So for it to impact me the way it did, um, it was very, yeah, it rocked me back on my heels. I have to say that. And, Brian, you had mentioned that it's like a roadmap. It can give you clues. And Logan just used the analogy of choosing to get some yard work done on a hot day. Well, it really helps to know that the day is going to be hot ahead of time so you can prepare accordingly,
Right.
right? So,
Right.
yeah,
Hmm.
definitely. I would definitely agree with you and say that astrology is a very, very powerful tool.
Mm.
One that I'm not educated in, but I have been, looking into the research of others, and basically, I just did my birth chart on like one of those free things online, just like as a joke
Hmm.
or whatever. Yeah, we'll see what happens, kind of thing, right? And yeah, like I said, it was staggering. I would say
Hmm.
probably 97% right, and I didn't even have my exact birth time, right? So.
Right. It is a science, and that's one thing that bringing that point that you brought up, that you didn't have your exact birth time. Whereas like the Vedic system, we tend to we want to make sure we have that exact birth time, because that actually differs a little bit from the tropical zodiac or the typical the Western system, which is your standard astrology that most people are familiar here in the West. In the Vedic system, we actually break things down in even more layers, known as like nikshatras. That they're constellations, that there's 27 of those, and then each of those are broke up into four padas, so then you get 108 of those. So getting, each little pada is a 3 to 4 minute segment, but even shifting one pada can actually change the effect that is going to play. So you can really
Mm.
start to narrow these things down. And then not only is there like your birth chart, but in the Vedic system we have divisional charts, like 60 other divisional charts that you can look
Mm.
at as well. So I mean, it is such a extremely vast and extremely complicated science that I definitely highly encourage people to start looking into that. And that's one of the reasons that we offer some of the services we do, and eventually we'll be developing our own course to put out there for so people can figure out how to actually go about this, what it all means, how to put it together, and things like that.
Mm.
Yeah, I noticed that on your website, and I definitely encourage everybody to go check out the wizardfactory.com. They have a fantastic website, and towards the end of the segment, I'd really like you to give a sort of in-depth description of what your services include, but you do include
Sure.
some Vedic astrology in your
Yes.
services.
Hmm.
So, you know, this is kind of a great segue into sort of the most important aspect of this topic, which would be how do we achieve balance? How do we go about starting to heal ourselves once we've recognized these polar dynamics that are being played off against us and we've begin to come to terms with this? How do we start healing ourselves? And as Bryan has gotten into, you know, giving yourself a roadmap, something to work with. You know, like the best example I could, or analogy I could give for astrology is, you know, that's kind of that friend that will give you the 100% honest opinion, whether you like it or not. You know, there's been some times where I've wished I could walk up to somebody else, a friend of mine, and say, listen, I want you to tell me all like the truth about me. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, what you're working with there is their perceptions of you at that point as well. So that's not even 100% accurate, right? But
Mm.
astrology, like you say, is a science. So you have something that's objective that can speak to you, and you know, I'm like, again, I'm not that educated in it. That's just from my perspective, coming at it from the outside. I guess it's only influenced me, as I've mentioned, but it is something that I'm definitely going to be looking deeper into. I'm in a really in-depth tarot study right now, and tarot is another system of self-discovery that can be very revealing and very helpful. And obviously, in my study of the tarot, I'm encountering a lot of astrological symbolism, and it's not something I've studied. So I've been kind of forced into kind of incorporating that into my current studies.
Mm.
So we have astrology as an awesome method of self discovery and potentially a method to help you start healing yourself, and also the tarot. Logan, do you have any methods of self discovery and healing that you could add to that list?
Well, for me, I kind of look at healing as one leg of a bipedal system. Like we walk on 2 feet, you have to walk, you got to put one foot down and then the other foot down, and the other foot is truth itself. So basically, you have to take a step towards truth, take in new truth that challenges your current belief system that is based on the traumas that you've experienced, and then you have to step into that healing to integrate that truth. If you take in too much truth, you're going to color the new information that you're taking in through your own projections and twist it, and and so, like, oftentimes that things are being said on the internet and people literally just can't handle what's being said because they haven't healed enough to fully receive it. But then, it works both ways, sort of in a dual, correspondence. Basically, you have to heal to take in new truth, and then you have to take in new truth in order to heal. So that is ongoing. So there's that sort of external study of, learning more about the way psychology works, and cosmic law and things like that. Also observing yourself in the current state that you are in, knowing yourself, trying to identify those subconscious behaviors that are surfacing and playing out in your day-to-day life. And then from there, I would say, and that's a great start, but to really dive in, you have to get into ritual, which we talk about in our
Hmm.
toolbox series with our free initiation package. Is the first thing you see when you go to the website is the initiation package, a little free video series that we put together, and it teaches you how to get into your circle, which is basically like your energetic sacred space, your circle, and different ways that you could work with the energies of the ancestors, of yourself, with the runes, all these different tools that you have at your disposal, that you're basically digging that pole down into the murky waters of your subconscious mind and trying to stir up some shit so that it floats to the surface, that you can actually deal with it. So you've got to get beyond, you got to break the surface and dive deep in that. And that's really the best way that I've found. There's lots of other modalities, like you said, NLP and emotional freedom technique, and there's all these different things, but that's kind of what's been speaking to me the most lately.
Right. Well, and that's where the arts and gnosis, a lot of people don't know with astrology. Not only can you start to become aware of these variables, but then again, as awareness brings choice, you can then choose to how you want to act with
Mm.
them, how you want to
Mhm.
direct those energies. And it's also giving you that roadmap that you can start to understand what energetic needs you need. Like, for example, each planet and sign are all associated with a certain element. So by looking at certain placements or certain things in areas in your life that you need strength, and you can start incorporating those elements, you actually start learning the science of how to develop a ritual that's specifically and energetically tailored to yourself. So you can start targeting all the different levels of your mind and how to
Mhm.
go about targeting each one of those levels. Like it really is such a vast science that I think is extremely underutilized. And the same with the runes, that when we do 9 world rune readings, you know, each one of those 9 worlds represents a certain aspect of our psychology. And the runes, we just did a introductory video series on those on our channel that people can go check out, but
Mm.
those all have their own representation. So seeing how all these energies come and play together, you become aware of them. And then that awareness brings a choice of where you want to move forward from there. And that's really what healing is all about, is becoming aware of our traumas, creating that choice, and then taking the free will decision and, being in alignment with cosmic law to move towards healing and growing past those.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. That's why it's like, it's an art and a science, because essentially you have it's a science, it's objective, but it's also very malleable and
Hmm.
individual as well.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. And, one thing that hit me while studying the Egyptian traditions is that, the life of a pharaoh was essentially one big ritual. And that's how I've begun to treat my own life. And if you look at, I think it was Logan that mentioned earlier, consciousness as being simply awareness, or actually I think it might have been you, Brian. Consciousness simply being awareness. What is being more conscious? Well, you can be more conscious about everything. You can consciously eat a meal. You can consciously apply yourself to whatever task. You can consciously read a book. You could consciously make love to your lover. In all of these examples, the level of attention that you are willing to dedicate to any given task or activity is going to also determine how much you get out of it, right? So you're not going to have like some sort of tantric sexual experience if you're thinking about work while you're trying to make love to your lover, right? You're not going to get the most out of a book if you're running all these other ideas through your head. So again, achieving a higher level of consciousness isn't like some sort of arrival point or anything like that. It's really just opening up yourself and dedicating attention to what you're attempting to focus on.
Present.
That's right. And that's absolutely necessary to incorporate in all of your ritual. And, one thing that I highly recommend everybody incorporate into their daily ritual is at least a short period of meditation. And I had actually mentioned in a previous conversation that since I started practicing meditation on a regular basis, I've felt the need to escape a lot less. And I guess it's good in some ways and bad in others, right? I'm becoming more of the hermit and a little bit more drawn in that way. But it's nice to feel that sense of security and satisfaction in your day to day life as well, right? Because
Hmm.
when you go somewhere, take a vacation, it is really just escapism. It's good to have recreation, and it's good to get away from things and have a reset. But nothing that you're leaving behind actually goes away, right? So
Mm.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that up, regarding the senses, and how you can do everything more consciously just by deepening that sort of presence and everything. Because again, I want to touch yet again on this programming, this kind of Abrahamic programming that the flesh is evil and the senses are to be shunned, and earthly things. Whereas Bryan, and Bryan's been working a lot with the goddess Freya, which is
Hmm.
uh, that Venusian energy. It's very sensual. It's about, as you said, Bryan, being committed to the experience of being human, because there is a reason
Right.
that we are incarnated here. There's a reason that we, imbue our life essence into these meat bags and walk around the earth to interact with reality through the senses. And that's really what it is that that's the experience that God is seeking through us, is by going around and taking that data from reality, from the atomic field and everything, through our senses of all the sights, the sounds, the smells, the sensations. Like, it's all beautiful, it's all spiritual, it's all divine, as long as we're enacting within alignment of moral law. That's the one stipulation there. But there's definitely that line is blurred with this Christian idea of sexuality versus just, as long as it's consensual, and that applies to age too, obviously. Then it's not the same kind of interpretation as what they teach, and it creates a lot of shame around sexuality, which I, being brought up in a Christian home, am still very much dealing with and trying to transmute myself.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that with you. I was also raised Christian, and I was fortunate enough to break out of it at a pretty young age. I was about 12 years old, and I pretty much said to my mom, like, I'm not going. You can't carry me there. So, and I remember that Sunday was like straight up like the Homer Simpson episode when he stays home from church. Except I was 12 and I wasn't drinking beer, right? But I laid around in my underwear all day watching TV and whatever, right? And it was the greatest Sunday of my life, of course. But I still had unfortunately gone through that programming through some of my formative years, right? So I think I was about 4 or 5 when my mom got saved. So that's when that started influencing my development. And unfortunately, if you have that programming during your formative years, it's very, very, very hard to break. And I like honestly, I haven't really done too much testing with like NLP or things like that in my own personal life, but I find it really hard to believe that you can break psychological programming that easily. I know there's a lot of people that that can attest to the fact that it works, but you know, I have to wonder how much of that is what's the word I'm looking for here? Are these people lying to themselves? Because of course that's what we all want to do, is leave our trauma behind. And if I could flip a switch and leave all my trauma behind, I'd really love to do that. I just find it hard to believe that that's possible. Can I get your guys' opinion on that?
Logan, would you like to go, or you want me to take it?
I mean, I believe it's possible. I really do. And just based on what I've studied of the brain, neurochemistry, and it's really just comes down to um, rewiring new neural pathways in the brain. And the reason that's so challenging is because of that primacy, the concept of primacy, that is what's learned first is learned best. And because they specifically and intentionally target programming children at a youngest age so that they have the hardest time breaking that programming. Definitely not saying it's easy, but I definitely believe that it's possible, especially with mindful, intentional practice through repetition, because repetition is the mother of learning for sure. And even as an adult, I do believe that we have that ability. It's just very difficult. And I definitely think you run the risk of sort of cheating yourself and bypassing. without actually doing that work.
That's right.
Because even I mean, this idea that Jesus can save you, um, you're getting your salvation without really earning it. And I think that that's actually very anti-spiritual and anti-sovereignty, because that's the whole point. And we chose to incarnate here, and we chose certain life experiences, including the traumas that are going to teach us the lessons are required to advance our souls into new levels. And so I think, it's a really difficult thing to put into words, because it's so easy to twist these ideas as far as what is good and evil, and that which is, harmful is still serving in a way. So it's really difficult to articulate that without sounding like you're saying, oh, evil's good, or there's no difference, or whatever, because there definitely is. But it is part of the experience, and it is part of what is molding and shaping us, as I've been referring to before. That which is trying to tear us apart is actually what is making us.
Hmm.
Right. So for me, how I see it is that there's no magic pill. We actually did an episode about this, called the magic pill, why we want it now. I think there are a lot of different useful techniques, but none of them, like I said, none of them are going to be an instant fix, the magic pill. They're going to be things that you have to put effort into. And then, as you were saying earlier, depending on how much effort, how much energy you put into it, that's going to determine your outcome. So, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
if you do a ritual one time and, you're not just going to be instantly fixed. You're not, if you just, take ayahuasca one time, it's not just going to fix all your issues. You could go on and on. It's not just going to be just one technique or just one event that has this healing happen. So I think that you're correct in that sense that it's not just going to be an instantaneous fix, but at the same time, I do believe fixing it is possible, but we need to recognize and always come back to the fact that it is a process that we have to constantly be willing to strive towards and be willing to sacrifice ourselves to go through that death and rebirth process all the time and continually remake ourselves and come
Mm.
into new levels of awareness.
Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
I guess one way I could delineate what I was trying to say earlier is, it's not that the trauma itself is a gift. The gift is the opportunity to learn how to put yourself back together again. And then you're
Right.
actually, like I was saying about your internal domain is your kingdom. That's you're remaking yourself exactly how you're designing yourself, basically. It's like that Incubus album, Make Yourself. I really like that. It's a that's a good album with a lot of good lyrics in it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I guess yeah, I should have been a little bit more clear with the concept I was trying to get across, and what I was trying to say is more that it doesn't work in the way that they're presenting. Like I know that a lot of people have had a lot of positive results, but like I say, it's not just a switch you can flick, and even if it was, it would have to be some sort of like self hypnosis, and like you had mentioned, Logan, you wouldn't be going through the work, and that's definitely the most important part. And if you don't go through the work of rebuilding yourself and healing yourself from these traumas, then they are for nothing, and then they are negative, right?
Yeah.
And again, the same thing applies in the physical realm. It's the same as training your body. When you train hard, you tear muscles and you rebuild them stronger.
Mhm.
That's what it's really all about. And you know the yeah, you guys hit on so many good points here. Bryan, you had brought up ayahuasca, which is a topic I'd actually wanted to bring up in reference to this with you guys. How do you guys feel about entheogens used in a conscious fashion for healing and self discovery?
Mhm. Sure, I can start here. So, how I look at plant teachers is that they are a tool. They're a very useful tool, but they are definitely not the only one. I think a lot of people will kind of see them as the end all be all, or oh, if everybody just ate mushrooms, we would all be fine. That's not really how it works. I think for plant teachers to really be most effective is that first there needs to be a need for them. I think they're a tool that should be used to crack open the shell. So in my experience, I went through a very traumatic childhood. I enlisted in the Marine Corps at 17. Specifically went to the infantry so I could try to go after I was a very locked off, emotionally uh, pent up individual. I had a lot of anger, a lot of rage. So whenever I, ate mushrooms for the first time, I had just these amazing life changing realizations. But where what I kind of naturally and intuitively felt guided to this, that I needed to make sure I was taking them for a reason. Like there was a lesson or there was something that I needed to gain from that experience. And I wasn't just taking it so I could see some cool shit or so I could enjoy, this fish show or some shit like that. I was taking it for the purpose of actually trying to learn and find an answer to a question that I was seeking. So I think when you consciously take them for that purpose of trying to find that answer, you're doing it, with ritual, with respect, with true intention. They're extremely valuable tools. But like I said, I think they're a tool to be used to crack open that shell. Once that shell's cracked open, you need to be able to take those experiences, those lessons you gained, and actually integrate them into your life and then continue that process on your own.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Logan?
I think you said it perfectly, Brian. They're a extremely powerful tool for me personally. I can acknowledge specifically DMT. DMT was actually the first I tried before mushrooms or anything like that. So I definitely blasted off in a big way, and I can recognize that that was a catalyst for a lot of things. I was sort of waking up in certain ways, but that was kind of like adding rocket fuel to it, where I really
Yeah.
started diving deep into certain aspects, especially about spirituality. It's what because I had this it's I went from Christianity to sort of atheism and then quantum physics and then the conspiracy world. So I was aware of certain things like that, but that was sort of that turning point where I started waking up to there's definitely more to reality than meets the eye, and I'm wrong by just denying anything spiritual, metaphysical, supernatural, whatever you want to call it. And I've also had some very intense experiences on specifically mushrooms and ayahuasca that I would describe as healing, very, very healing. It's kind of like you're just it. It's just something that, for me, the most useful aspect. I'll just break it down like this: is purging. It's something that really it removes some of those barriers and blockages that we impose upon ourselves through that programming, that overly masculine, just like constantly criticizing and judging and restricting and holding yourself back. And then when those things are removed, you can really allow things to release, especially emotionality, because think of that's on the other side, where that masculine is trying to like be tough and be strong and keep it all together and just bottle it up. Just allowing those emotions to be released is such a relieving feeling. It's absolutely incredible. And so I have to really acknowledge and give testament to the the usefulness of them as a tool on my journey. But they are certainly, like Brian said, not an end all be all. They're not going to fix everything. You still have to do the work. They're just something. It's kind of like any herb that you're just
Hmm.
you're using it in tandem with everything else.
Of
Hmm.
course. Yeah, I definitely agree with the perspective you guys have presented on that, and same from my personal experience. I've had a life altering, totally healing experience on psilocybin, and from my own personal perspective, growing up, I was the type of person to take party drugs and take those types of things recreationally.
Mm.
So for most of my life, I guess that would have been something that I would have abused.
Mm.
I never had any bad experiences on it. But leading up to this one specific experience, I had taken them on what with a recreational intent, and yeah, ended up having a life-altering healing experience that totally changed my perspective on them. And
Mm,
ever since then, there's been one or two more times where I tried to do them recreationally after that, and I couldn't because I would automatically go into this super deep self-reflective state that I had achieved before, and it's almost like it's almost like breaking through levels in your meditation or something. Once you reach a certain level, it's much easier to get there again, and almost
mm,
harder to reside in the other levels that you had been in before. So it's almost that same principle applied to mushrooms for me, and I just can't, like, even if I wanted to, I wouldn't be able to take them recreationally now. So, that's the level of reverence and respect that I've developed for them. And I will attest to them being a very, very powerful healer. But, one thing I do want to bring up related to that, and this goes along with almost everything else we've been talking about related to ritual and everything as well. There are many different plant healers out there, and there are many different mystical occult traditions. And different teachers, different philosophies will resonate with different people on a genetic level.
mm.
Unfortunately, in the case of entheogens, you're now, because most of us are disconnected from our true heritage, you're kind of left stabbing in the dark to see what works for you. I think any healing plant can be healing at some level for anybody, but I also think that based on your genetics, you'll have a stronger connection to specific plants
Mm,
as well as specific
absolutely.
philosophies. So,
I definitely agree.
Yes, that excellent point.
yeah.
And I, just to tie it back to kind of the theme of this conversation altogether, I think this is one way you could look at what we were talking about is sort of balancing the use of entheogens between uh, having enough respect for them to use them intentionally, so not recreationally. So that's one side of the polarity, but also not relying on them almost in a codependent way where you're using them to sort of bypassing doing that work yourself. That's kind of that middle ground for me.
Yes,
Hmm.
very, very important. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so sorry about that. I just totally lost my train of thought. Where were you
Happens
with?
to all of
Oh yeah, what I wanted to bring up was, you know, cannabis. I have to bring up cannabis in light of this conversation we're having because, I think in our sick psychopathic society that we live in, the need for some mental decompression, um, is there for most people. And we're seeing this manifest in a very negative fashion with the pharmaceutical industry and, SSRIs and all of those mind altering substances, which people are becoming dependent upon. And like you had mentioned, Logan, very important not to become dependent on entheogens. We had discussed making ritual as a way to heal yourself. Don't make ritual of doing entheogens every single day or even every weekend for that matter.
Mm,
I agree. It's definitely something to be used to kind of crack a shell, as you put it. And again, as we discussed, we do have many shells. So there may be a point within your self discovery or journey that you may feel the need to interact with these plant healers again. But again, that's something that has to be left up to your personal discussion or discretion rather. And that brings me to another important point. The level of responsibility and self accountability that goes along with this process of healing and battling the forces that are trying to hold us down here in this reality. we do have to apply ourselves, and we do have to make ourselves accountable to ourselves. You had mentioned the internal monarch earlier, Logan. And I just had a conversation with Michael Tazarian where he had touched on playing off the master slave dynamic within yourself. And so again, we're looking for this state of balance where we're accountable to ourselves and we're constantly pushing ourselves forward, progressing and healing, taking negative experiences and turning them around to use them positively. But we also have to be careful not to be too hard on ourselves and to become our own master and become slaves to ourselves. It's one of the more difficult concepts to really discuss and get a grasp on, in my opinion. But it's definitely detrimental to our self discovery and self awakening as well. So.
Well, yeah, for me, I like to shift that the way that I frame that dynamic from a master slave. I mean, it works in some ways, but it's very kind of black and white almost, where the master is the total domineer, and then the slave is just totally submitting to everything. I like to look at it more like a parent and child relationship, because they both have roles to play, and more of a they both have kind of more their sovereignty in a way, where the child still needs to be heard, it still needs to be loved, it still needs to be respected, even though the paternal figure is more the authority, but not authoritarian, if that makes sense. So kind of balancing where you're being a steward of your lower self and trying to align that higher will with the objective good, but you're also accepting of yourself where you are, and you're in all of your imperfections, again doing away with that monotheistic programming of just like holding yourself to that impossible standard. You accept yourself where you are, you love yourself as you are, but always pushing towards growth, towards expansion and maturity, in a way like a father or a parent would push their child to take on more responsibilities, but only at the pace that they are comfortable with, so that they can build that confidence within themselves to accept those responsibilities.
Hmm.
Sure. Well, again, I think we need to look at the terminology we're using, because as soon as you bring that bring authority into the picture, that's when the master slave dynamic starts playing out. And what you're describing, Logan, to me more sounds like a teacher student relationship, where
Mm-hmm.
the student can recognize the ability and knowledge that the teacher has, and the teacher can recognize that the student just hasn't gotten there yet. So it's more of a relationship of cooperation, right?
Right.
Hmm.
But the
Rather
student
than
still teaches the teacher too.
that's true, very true. Yeah, and again, I
Right.
guess going hand in hand, it's another polar dynamic almost that is necessary. One wouldn't exist without the other. You wouldn't have a teacher if there wasn't a student, right?
Hmm.
So,
Well, and
And
I'd like
really
to
tells the student.
keep in mind that we're all students and teachers.
Yes.
But
that's
that
true.
you're always learning, and you also have the ability to teach, even if you're not necessarily realizing that's what you're doing. Just people observing your behavior and the experience that you're having can allow them to learn lessons and glean lessons from it that you may not even be, learning from your own
Hmm.
behavior. So,
Well,
I think
I
it's
like to say that
interesting
even the
to,
fool can be the teacher, because he's teaching you how not to be.
That's
right,
right.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah, well,
Everything. Yeah.
yeah, that's why conversations like this are so important as well, right? Like you had mentioned that the internet's being used for a lot of, to project a lot of negative intent out into the world. But, we have a lot of power here. I'm not sure where you guys are, but are you down in the States or?
Hmm.
Yeah, so I'm up in Alberta, Canada. We're most likely thousands of kilometers or miles away from each other, if you prefer. And
Kilometers.
And yeah, but we can still get together and have a conversation like this, and we can all grow from each other, and give people out there the chance to listen and grow and be a part of a conversation like this, even if they don't necessarily get to chime in with their opinion necessarily. They can still listen into a conversation like this and come to their own conclusions. And my brother actually he quoted someone to me. I can't remember who the quote was from, but he had said, "No two people ever read the same book, and no two people ever listen to the same podcast or same conversation. And all three of us are taking something different away from this at the end of the evening as well. And
Hmm.
it really accelerates our rate of progression. I think being able to interact with everybody on this level, and but at the same time, I think it's very important not to get caught up in this reality, and also remember that our true work, like we've touched on so many times, is within ourselves and also reflected into the reality around us. So, most importantly, we do need to be focusing on ourselves and how we're impacting our reality field and also those around us, because it is a shared reality.
Hmm.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
Well, we're pretty much coming up to the end of the segment here, guys, and I really wanted to give you a chance to go in depth a little bit on the services that you offer. Like I said, I was peeking around on your website a bit there, and I'm intrigued myself. I'd like to hear a little bit more of what you guys have going on there. So,
Sure. So, the first place people should start is our free initiation package. I mean, it's free content. It's a video series we put out there that is laying the foundations to start stepping into ritual and into magical practice. And then we also teach some breathing techniques and things like that that can specifically be used to work with and target the unconscious mind, start stimulating a lot of this trauma and programming that we have. And then so you can work with that. And then we also have some other like paid packages like our Phoenix package, which is teaching some more in-depth spell work and things like that in order to bring about more serious transformation.
Mm.
And then we have our Arts of Gnosis services that we offer, where we look at Vedic astrological consultation. I go through and I look at your birth chart, give you it's a extremely in-depth consultation, very information dense. But when people do get that, they do get recordings of all our consultations, so they can go back and review them as many times as they need. But what I do in there is I look at the specific areas that you have strengths, that you have weaknesses, what planets are helping you correlate with the different levels of your mind so you can specifically work with those to target those areas of your mind. And then I develop a ritual specifically for you based off of that. And kind of the same story with the 9 world rune readings, where we're taking like energetic snapshot of a specific question or area that you're looking for clarification on, and then seeing all the placements, what energies are at play, and then designing ritual to counteract any potential blockages that come up. And then Logan, do you want to kind of maybe describe what we get into with like the adaptive personal coaching and things?
Yes, so that and if you purchase our reflections package, you're getting all three of those as a consultation bundle basically, and that service would come last. So basically what it's going to do is pull information from your astrological chart, from the rune reading, and then sort of focus it into a one-on-one interaction or dialogue based on what is your particular area of interest. Are you having some area of blockage in your life, or are you just feeling like you don't know what direction to go? Is it a specific scenario that's giving you trouble, or just kind of a general looking for some guidance in some kind of way? And then we tailor that to the client and what they're desiring to get out of it, but using a foundational basis of natural law, of universal principles that are, by definition, universal means applicable in all cases, and sort of figure out how that applies to in its unique way to the individual. So that's pretty much what that is in a nutshell. So yeah, the initiation package, like you said, that's the best place to start. And then that Phoenix package is kind of just like an expansion pack where it is a paid content, but it's really diving deeper and adding more depth to those fundamentals that you will learn from that toolbox series. And then so that's sort of the gradient going from free up to how in depth do you really want to go, and how
Hmm.
far do you take it. So, and we're actually still building a lot of more
Right.
content, more packages. I mean, we really have a lot in mind of things that we want to do, but as we were discussing earlier, we just started back in March, so we're getting it out as fast as we can, and we definitely have big plans, but just taking it a day at a time, really.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I commend you guys. We definitely need more people at the forefront, acting as teachers and guides. And again, you openly state on your website, like, you guys aren't a quick fix. They still have to do the work for themselves, like we've said so many times in this
Yep.
show. And, that candid approach shows you the level that you guys are coming at. And, like, for all of us, we have to survive in this reality construct that we're in right now. It's not like Harry Potter where you can wave a magic wand and everything changes. Even if every single human on the face of the earth decided to start on the path of the great work today, things are still not going to change overnight, and we all still have to
Right.
survive here, right? So I really commend you guys. I know you're both definitely working to support yourselves as well as producing all of this content, and you're also going out of your way to offer your services to people for a very reasonable price, I must say as well. Your pricing is very reasonable. And if you're the type of person who is working all day and just doesn't know where to start, this is a great place for you to go and get started. Like you said, your initial initiation package is free. So it's a great place to give some people some direction. And at the end of the day, like I had mentioned, you need to discover what resonates with you on a genetic level. And really, that's what's key to this path of self discovery. You can't. You'll know what it is as soon as you find it, because you'll be
Yep.
drawn to it, irresistibly drawn to it, right?
Hmm.
And this is coming from the perspective of somebody like, when I was younger, I wasn't interested in history or anything like that. You know what I mean? And as soon as you get connected to something that resonates with you on a genetic level, yeah, you'll feel the connection.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
and just one final note is that our flagship product is and always will be our free podcast. We put out new episodes every single week on YouTube, the Wizard
Hmm.
Factory YouTube channel. So go check us out there. We try to cover a lot of different topics to really give that holistic vision of uh, the inner and outer worlds, the cosmic law, the as above so below, and then but with a strong emphasis on empowerment, healing, and solutions. We don't just want to
Hmm.
point at problems, that's the easy part. Then what do you do about it? So definitely check us out on YouTube, and then also follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Currently we're on all those platforms as well.
Awesome. That's awesome, guys. And I have to say, that's really what drew me to you, is your solutions based approach to healing. Because again, it's not only talking about the healing. Let's get some tools together, put a toolkit together for people, and start taking action. And that's what you guys are doing. It's awesome. Again, I commend you for that. And I want to say thanks a lot for coming on the show, guys.
Well, thanks for
Thank
having
you
us.
for having us.
Yeah, for sure. And
Pleasure, man.
once again, everybody, I'm Jay Anarchon with CognitiveConcurrence.com. I do want to encourage everybody to start getting used to going to the website. We all know how things are going on social media right now, and it's not just for the truth and freedom community. It's actually for anybody that's kind of bucking the status quo out there. Even stunt riders on motorcycles are having their channels demonetized and banned right now. So in the future, I will be moving towards hosting my own videos directly on my website, and possibly just disconnecting from YouTube altogether. Just from a moral perspective, to boycott and not support them if I can possibly manage it. So yeah, I would really encourage everybody to get used to going to the website and looking for new content there, and also subscribe through the website. And again, you guys can check these guys out at wizardfactory.com. And on top of those awesome services they offer, they actually have a pretty cool T-shirt up there as well. So. Be sure to check them out, guys. Thanks a lot for tuning in for this cognitive conversation. Take care.